Hey, g'day, it's Scott Gibbons here and I'm with Barnaby Houth and this is Everyday Greatness and we've got Amanda FARRUGIA and I'm going to tell you all about her. But if you grabbed your surfboard and you paddled into the middle of the ocean where the water's flat and calm and you just closed your eyes and started paddling and then ended up catching a wave that would be the same feeling, I guess, today, inaugural GWS Giants AFLW captain Amanda FARRUGIA felt when she became a professional sports person. Amanda thought she'd give AFL a crack after listening to her brother recite statistics about footy over the dinner table and wondered what the hell he was talking about. And after playing various social sports over the years, AFL caught her attention and she stuck with it, climbing through the ranks at Macquarie University Warriorrs, where she won three Mostyn medals for the best and fairest player in the Sydney Women's AFL before being drafted by the GWS Giants, the AFLW team, where she led the team into the first season of Women's AFL in the history of the sport. Amanda started playing AFL in 2011, but the professional AFLW competition didn't kick off until 2017, so this is where she was paddling on flat water with her eyes closed when she was picked up, though. She rode that wave and played all possible 21 games across her 3 seasons until retiring in 2019. Amanda doesn't take her role as a role model for young girls lightly. She tells them they need to be determined, healthy, passionate, and lead by example. And she's been all of those things and so much more. Amanda FARRUGIA personifies modern Australia and is a real pleasure to welcome her to Everyday Greatness. G'day, Amanda.
G'day, guys. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Oh, it's a buzz. I'm telling you, it's a buzz. We've been waiting to chat with you. So growing up as a young girl in Greystanes in Sydney, what did you dream of becoming? What was your dream?
My dream wasn't to do anything particularly significant at the time. In the 80s and early 90s, unfortunately, there weren't that many opportunities for young girls to pursue professional sports because there were no role models really to aspire to emulate. And unfortunately, it just meant that sport was kept pretty social, it was kept fun, and it was kept to the school playground. So I was pretty happy doing that at the time. And it wasn't until I was much older that pathways started to develop, and I thought I'd tap into those and ended up where I did.
I reckon. How brave were you to take up AFL in a rugby league heartland?
Yeah, look, it was a little bit out of the ordinary, to be fair, especially for a mid-20s-year-old woman to be doing it. I mean, when a lot of women are thinking about getting married and pursuing careers and that kind of thing, I'd already had my career established and I just wanted to try something different in terms of sport because I'd done the same things all my life, and I had no sort of idea at all that it would end up where it did. I didn't have aspirations to be a professional athlete. I just wanted to play for fun, but doors kept opening and, opportunities kept arising. So I was like, okay, I should do that.
What a buzz. I mean, all the hard work and the perseverance and determination and skill, you really made it happen. So who were you watching when the AFLW draft was happening, when you got picked up by the Giants? Who else did you have your eyes on that you wanted to either play against or play with? Well,
the initial draft, and I could probably say on behalf of my other Sydney AFL teammates as well, we didn't really have much idea about what existed outside of the AFL Sydney competition. We were quite a small state-based competition as relative to some of the other states, particularly Western Australia and Victoria, and even Queensland at the time was pretty well established. So we didn't have much idea about who was who in the big world of the AFLW. But when we went down to the draft, it was like a introductory session where they told you about the competition and all the ins and outs of what the AFLW was going to be like, and that was at the MCG, I think. You got to rub shoulders with, some of the biggest names in football in the country, and that's when it really became real that you were going to be competing against these girls. And you thought, oh, far out, there's Daisy Pearce, who's now a absolute icon of the sport and will be forevermore, and, Katie Brennan and those kinds of women. And, they're still heavily involved in the sport, and it just goes to show you that, you've got the big names and, they're always going to do great things in the sport, but don't sell short the small, unpredictable packages from Western Sydney who decide to kind of throw their hat in the ring and then find themselves on the big stage with all the other people. So
good, you.
Yeah, I guess my message was anything was possible, and I think I was a big story in that regard because I'd come from nothing to, play against them, which was a great feat, something I'm always be proud of.
You're phenomenal. So now that you've retired from the AFLW, do you feel like there's a responsibility now to be a role model? Is that important to you?
When I was still involved with AFLW and in the real infancy of the competition, I felt that responsibility quite firmly because the competition was still very raw. And although 8 years on, we're coming into the 8th season, it's still raw relative to other established professional competitions. It has come a long way in a short period of time. So there are plenty of little girls who are now playing AFL from Auskick level, so when they're 5 years old, and they know very clearly they have a pathway. And that's something that didn't exist when I started playing. So there's been a huge shift in what girls are able to do in the short space of time that I've been involved with football, and that's the AFLW effect. So I don't feel my responsibility as firmly now as a role model to teach girls that they can play footy. They know they can play footy. It's now about teaching them, I guess, what the qualities are that you need to possess to be able to make it all the way to the top. Perseverance and work ethic, rather than, hey, the sport exists, you can do anything, because that story's been told. It's more about what am I doing now to be elite, and that's what boys have been told for a really long time because they've had those pathways already set up and they knew they just had to hone the skills to be the best. The girls now need that message too. So instead of a you can have a go attitude, it's now you can have a go and be elite, and this is what you've got to do to get there.
Yeah, that's very wise words. Very, very wise words. I've got a little bouncing Barnaby opposite me, bouncing up and down saying, I've got questions, so I'm going to pass you to Barnaby.
Amanda Farrugia, I have been watching your career from the Sydney AFL playing days, and I feel like it's an honour to speak to you today. So thank you so much for joining us. Now, you talked a little bit about the difference between girls playing AFL and boys playing AFL. Mm-hmm. In the boys' world of AFL, draft day is huge. A lot of Victorian kids go to the pub with their families and friends, and it's a big celebration. Where did you watch the AFLW draft from?
It's probably not too dissimilar to the place I'm currently speaking to you from. I was actually at school at the time, and I was teaching my Year 12 PE class, and we had a double period that day, and I hadn't really told anybody else what was going on, but I said to them, look, ladies, at this time in the day, the draft is going to be on, and I've nominated for the draft, and I'm going to know if I've made it into the AFLW or not. Pretty much in 20 minutes. So when it gets closer, can we just stop doing our work for a moment and just tune into this? So I had the data projector going and we had it on the big screen, and when my big smiling face popped up at pick 64, they went ballistic and pretty much screamed the house down in the school, and I had teachers coming into the room thinking that someone had an episode of some kind because they were just so overwhelmed. It was lovely to be able to share it with them because they were enthralled. I was stoked. I was shaking and sweating and just, overawed with emotion because it was something that I'd never imagined would ever happen. But, a really special moment to share it with my students.
That's an awesome story. I'm tipping you probably didn't think it was ever going to happen when you were playing at the Macquarie University Warriorrs. Who were some of the unsung heroes at Macquarie Uni? There's so many people back in the day who just turned up every week, volunteered, cleaned the sheds, sold the pies. Who are some of the more memorable characters at Macquarie Uni you remember?
Oh, those early days, it was had a really strong community atmosphere at Macquarie University. And the great thing about it was there were a lot of old boys there who just plugged away at playing footy, not because they were, cutting people up on the field anymore, but it was more just because they loved the sport. So, there was a player who I played with called Liz Fasone, who was there at the beginning when the club was officially started back in 2009, I think. She's just retired recently, but she was the real catalyst towards getting the team up and running. And another girl called Kim Waldhouse, who's now a mum as well, and is long retired, but she was the person I remember I initially contacted to say, hey, I'm wondering if you have an AFL team. It says on your website that you do, and can I come to a training session? Because prior to that, I'd actually emailed UTS, and because that was a university I went to, and asked them if they had a team, but they emailed back saying, oh, look, at the moment the team's not really up and running. So the next closest option was Macquarie Uni. So contacted Kim and Liz, and then there were the people who put their hand up to coach women's footy, because back in 2011, it was not the first job that people were rushing to do. So Dan Ranson was a guy who committed a lot of time and effort to the women's program. He coached the team for a number of years and took the team to multiple premierships. David Marsh was another one who co-coached with him. And just one thing that I really found about Macquarie University was every single one of the boys got around you in a big way. And as a girl playing football for the first time, no matter what age you are, that means a lot to have the guys who are the stalwarts of the organisation get around you and make you feel welcome. That was really special. Yeah. So that's what made me stick with Macquarie all these years, and I still play for them to this day, because they showed so much loyalty and support to me in the early years, and I wanted to pay that back to them.
Very beautifully said. So back in the day when Kim and Liz were your teammates or at the club with you, there was some whispers about there maybe one day being an AFLW competition. Did you ever look in the mirror and think to yourself, I might play in that one day?
Definitely not. I mean, I have just played sport for the majority of my life just for enjoyment. I was always pretty decent at it. I always felt pretty capable in it and felt really comfortable in sport, but growing up, I had no aspirations to be an elite athlete because it wasn't something I'd been really encouraged to do. My parents were supportive, but, didn't really have much of an idea about the capacity or potential for girls to pursue elite sport. Yeah. I'm pretty short. Really somebody who's just cracked in and had a go and don't really have any particular genetic qualities that would make me, suited to elite sport. So it wasn't something that I really thought I was good enough to do. But I remember having some conversations with some people at Macquarie University who suggested and encouraged me to do it. And I thought, look, this is one of those moments that if you don't have a crack at, you'll probably regret it, and you will always think back to what could have been. And I know that I didn't want to have those questions in my mind, further down the track when I was 50 and 60 and not really capable of doing anything in the sporting arena anymore. So that was my attitude when I put myself forward to be in the draft. I wouldn't have been disappointed if I didn't make it because I had such limited expectations, but the complete opposite happened.
That's a very good attitude. And just to reassure you don't need to be genetically blessed to play in the AFL. I've seen a lot of people that probably wouldn't have thought they'd make it there. So we're recording this podcast from the Sydney Swans AFL headquarters, and a lot of the AFLW girls are walking around and they're just bubbling with excitement of how happy they are to be a professional sports person. How exciting is today's world for young girls in terms of the opportunities available to them that weren't available when you were in school?
Oh, it's so exciting. I mean, there are so many aspects of being a teenager that I think are really, really difficult now. The pressure we place on them to be a lot of things is really overwhelming, particularly from a school point of view. But what balances that out is the opportunities they have to pursue whatever it is that they want to. You can literally do anything. You can be a professional athlete in most popular sporting codes that exist in Australia these days. And the good thing is as well, there are the pathways being set up to be able to support that. So no longer do you just have to, go out and spend a whole bunch of money on a private coach or have parents that push you in that right direction. Schools are being set up that help facilitate that. Community football organisations are really channeling lots of funding, lots of resources into creating opportunities for girls. And it's no longer a conversation if an AFL Sydney club has a women's team. The question now is, how many women's teams do you have? Yeah. Which is a sign of the times and a sign of the fact that girls belong in this arena in elite sport. So whether or not you're 5 or you're 15, it's never too early or too late to have a go. And the fact that I started when I was 25 is testament to that. So yeah, it's a great space to be in the sporting world. And it's not just in professional sport as a player as well. I mean, the opportunities in sport media and journalism and commentary and all those sorts of things, they're opening up in a big way on the back of the emergence of professional sport too. So it's nice to see that, and it's exciting.
It is very exciting, and it's really nice to feel the buzz around the place. So you talked earlier about the importance of being a good role model for the young girls that you knew or watching you when you're playing. Who were your role models when you were a young girl yourself?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because if you were a young girl playing AFL now of any age, you'd have some really strong role models to aspire to if footy was the sport that you'd want to pursue. I can't say that I had any of those because they weren't apparent, they weren't visible.
Right.
I grew up in a time where if you wanted to watch any kind of elite sport, you had to pay for it on an old streaming system called Optus Vision, which cost a lot of money. And other than that, you had 4 mainstream TV channels to watch. So the access to elite women's athletes was very, very limited, unless they were really prevalent and did something really extreme, like Kathy Freeman's 400-metre Olympic gold medal in the 2000 Olympics. Yeah. You weren't hearing much about it. So I really went out on a limb, I guess, just hoping that I would be accepted as a young girl playing sport and not hit any particular roadblocks because there was nothing really to aspire to. It was hard to see that it was okay to do it because there wasn't anyone forging a path when I was a kid. So I'm just lucky that, I found my way a little bit later in life and I wasn't really turned away from being a sporty kid, so to speak, when I was younger.
Yeah. I take my hat off to you. I think it must have been a really brave thing to do, being a female AFL footballer in a very male-dominated world. So hat off to you. What you talked earlier about young teenage girls having a lot more challenges these days with social media and bullying and all that sort of rubbish that goes on. What do you say to your students? You're a PE teacher at that school. What do you say to your students if they complain about not being good enough in a particular sport when you're teaching them?
I guess the message I send to my students, PDHP is mandatory from year 7 to 10, so every kid has to do it. And there are just some girls who don't like sport, and that is totally fine. I don't say to girls that you have to like this. It's just like you don't say to a child you have to like maths. But the message that I try and just reinforce is that, as long as you bring your PE uniform and you're participating and having a go and putting in whatever your best effort looks like, then that's enough for me and that's adequate. So for the girls who don't find it particularly interesting or don't have the skill capacity, that's my message to them. For the girls who are gifted in a particular sport and have some real aptitude, it's more about kind of understanding where they want to take their sport. Not every girl wants to, no matter their talent, not every girl wants to make it to the professional level, and that's fine. I had an old coach once who told me elite sport's not for everyone, and that's a very strong point and a very accurate one too, because to be an elite athlete in professional sport, there is significant sacrifice, particularly for women still, and it can really get overwhelming quite quickly. So I don't promote and encourage to the point where it's forced. It's more about gauging the level of interest from the individual themselves and then supporting them through whatever direction they want to take their sporting interest, rather than saying, oh, you're really good at kicking and catching, you have to do this.
Yeah. Amanda, I have a 16-year-old daughter and a swathe of young nieces, and I'm really happy and really reassured that you're the kind of role model they'll be looking up to. Thank you so much for joining me, but now I want to pass you back to Scotty to ask you a few more questions.
Cheers, Barnaby. Appreciate it.
You were just terrific. So what did you have to sacrifice personally for you to be elite?
Well, I had to find a bit of confidence from somewhere because in the first training session, rocking into GWS Giants headquarters, I'd played 6 years of park football. And I was rocking into an elite sporting organisation with talented girls who'd come up from Victoria and played it since they were, 10, 11, 12 years old. So confidence was one thing. And even though I wasn't really feeling that confidence internally, I had to present a facade that I was, because I knew that it was an opportunity that I had to take with both hands and put my best foot forward. So that was probably the biggest focus at that point.
But what about your social life?
Social life, that took a big hit, I'll be honest. I don't think when I was playing, to be honest, Sydney AFL football, I really did prioritise that. So I don't think I went to a family function or a social occasion in the daytime probably for a period of 5 or 6 years.
Gee.
And I had no hesitation at the time in foregoing those social events because football was my priority and I thrived on it.
Gee, you're good. You're good.
Look, I'm back playing AFL Sydney now, and if something really important came up, I definitely would prioritise it because I've managed to figure out the balance a little bit better. But at the time, that's what I felt like I needed to do.
Yeah.
And again, I was making all these decisions based on what I thought was best, not necessarily on any kind of mentorship or guidance that I was getting. And I probably could have dealt with it and done well with that at the time, some mentorship and guidance. But I was just kind of making some decisions based on what I thought was best. So probably not recommended to forego all the social opportunities because balance is key. Spending a lot of time at the football club means your personal relationships, I wouldn't say decline, but those people need to have a strong understanding about who you are as a person and your commitment and dedication to those things. But a lot of sacrifices are worth it. Some not so much.
I reckon we could talk to you a lot more, but we've got to wind it up, unfortunately. But
no
you're good. Gee, you're good. And you're generous with your time and you're generous with your answers. It's probably one of the reasons that you're elite is because you give.
Thanks. That's nice. It's nice to hear. I think it is a really important thing when you're in a community-based sporting organisation like I am now. I mean, everybody chips in to make sure that it's a finely oiled machine. Otherwise, they just don't work. So giving is important.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us. It's been sensational talking to someone today who's just setting the perfect example of how to be a good human being. We've got to thank the ARA Group for being our major sponsor for 6 years in a row. 6 years they've been sponsoring us, which is just so good. And thank you for listening. We hope that we've helped you become a better Joanne or even a Joe Bag of Donuts. I'm Scott Gibbons with Barnaby Health. Thanks for listening today, and thank you so much, Amanda. You are just too generous, and you're a real star.
No problem. Pleasure. Thanks so much, guys.